Very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. This is Sally Chu calling from Temasek Polytechnic Center for Transcultural Studies, bringing you the third in the series of live webinars organized by the Singapore Training and Development Association, better known as STADA here in Singapore. Today's webinar is entitled Building High-Functioning Teams. Coming to you live from the Glocal Connect Village at Temasek Polytechnic, the connecting place. I see Robert, the ED of STADA, on the screen. Robert, would you come on and tell them the STADA story?
Good morning, Sally and all. I think you asked me a very dangerous question. You could be sitting here the whole day. However, I will try and do it in 2 minutes. I joined STADA about 5 years ago, where we decided that we need to go on this journey of transformation. And since then, we have been on this journey. And our objective is to create what I call a new age association. Now, what do you mean by a new age association? It actually means that the association has to continue to reinvent itself so that it can align and evolve with the marketplace in order to continue to add value to the learning community. Not only to add value alone, but to work with the community to co-create new knowledge. I think it's important as a community, we need to grow together in learning and development, therefore resulting in our own individual development and growth. As a result of that, like you hear from Sally, we started the live webinar about 4 months ago, and the idea is to engage the learning community not only in Singapore, not only in the region, but also globally. And on this note, I say thank you, Roger, for being with us today. Although it's 9 o'clock in the night at your place, I'm quite sure you had your dinner, and I'm quite sure you're preparing to go to bed. Anyway, we have also, which I'm proud to announce, that 4 months ago, we actually launched the student chapter in Temasek Poly. And thanks to Sally and Temasek Poly, we have now created another channel and journey for the young people to come on board, to learn about this community, so that as they leave and join the marketplace, they can be an active and contributive member of the community, so that we can all grow together. And thereby, I think you have known that STADA has created a platform called Community Spirit, of which we want the community to be in there as community of practitioners sharing and learning the application of knowledge rather than just the acquisition of knowledge. On that note, I say thank you. It's about 2 minutes, Sally.
Thank you so much, Robert. I know you find it so hard to tell the story in 2 minutes, but thank you for doing a great job. I can see Petronas, I can see Pertamina all locked in, waiting, and of course, students, you can say a good high five, and we will very quickly want to go on to give our other participants a chance to introduce themselves. May I invite Rizky, since you're on the screen first, could you just tell us your name, your country, and the company you're representing?
Okay, my name is Rizky. I'm from Pertamina, Indonesia. Currently, I'm in office Jakarta. My company is a subordinate of Pertamina, which is focusing in offshore activity. I'm joined the HR team since December 2012.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
We're going to come back to you later, and you please
ask
the questions you're going to ask that is going to be so relevant for you in your workplace after our speaker has presented. I see Puan from Petronas. Puan, would you like to say hello to the viewers?
All right. Can you hear me?
Very well, thank you.
All right. Okay. My name is Zainubia binti Abdul Aziz. Please address me Zai for short. And I'm actually from Petronas Leadership Center. Okay, I am actually one of the learning specialists in PLC for short we call it. And our role, PLC's role is actually supporting our parent company, which is Petronas, an oil and gas national company in Malaysia.
Thank you so much, Zai. We will come back to you again later after our presenter has spoken. While we are waiting for the others to log in, we are having about 5 countries participating this morning. But I just want to tell you a little bit about our presenter this morning, Roger Schwarz. He is a well-recognized thought leader. Think of teams, think of Roger. That's how we would introduce him. He has been very much involved in team leadership and improving team effectiveness, and a very sought-after advisor to global companies, federal agencies, and also not-for-profit organizations. And of course, if you don't know by now, you should know, he is also the author of the best-selling book, The Skilled Facilitator, and of course, he's president and CEO of his company. Why did we get Roger to speak and to share today? Because we love his work and his mission. Roger's mission is to help create teams and organizations that are innovative and successful and honor the best of who we are as human beings. And this resonates, I'm sure, with all of you because you are all into human capital development. We are not into having just a workplace, but more than a workplace. We want to see a workplace with high performance, highly engaged people, and of course, high profits. Roger, you have so much to talk about you, but I will try to do so in a very, very short time. For more than 30 years, Roger consulted, taught, facilitated, coached, and spoke with many, many groups to create effective leadership teams. Prior to the founding of his company, he served as a tenured associate professor of public management and government. He was also with the Institute of Government at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He earned his science degree in psychology in Tufts University. He got his doctorate in organizational psychology from the University of Michigan. And of course, he got his MA degree from Harvard University. There's a lot more to him to tell, but because we only have 1 hour for this session, we are going to leave it to you to go find out more about team, and it's not difficult. For this coming hour, Roger will share for about 30 minutes, and the rest of you who are logging in from Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, and elsewhere, keep your questions as you hear his presentation. How might you be able to use what he's sharing today to build your own high-performing teams? You are a smart leader, we know, but how do you grow smarter teams? I think that's what's on our heart today. Over to you, Roger, please.
Thank you, Sally, and thank you, everyone at STADA. I appreciate your bringing us all together. And good morning to those of you who are in your part of the world. As you said, in my part of the world, it's evening right now, and happy to have the conversation with you. As Sally said, I'm going to be spending about 30 minutes talking about what it takes to create high-functioning teams based upon the book that I just wrote and published called Smart Leaders, Smarter Teams. And during that time, just so that you know, because I'll be using a number of slides, I'll have the slides up. You'll be hearing me, but you won't be seeing me. You'll be seeing the slides. And then when we go to the questions and answers, I'll come back and I'll see you, and you'll see my face, and we can talk about questions and answers. So with that, let me just bring up the slides. Everything that I'm going to share this evening is based on a combination of research and my more than 30 years as an organizational psychologist. And as I said, my purpose is simple with you, to help you think about the ideas that I'm sharing, to think about how they relate to your own teams, and to consider whether your team is where you need it to be. So let's get started. Let's look at the first slide. How well does your team really work? That's the first piece of this puzzle. To help you think about that question, I want to tell you about a leadership team that faced the same question. John Haley had recently been promoted to group president of a global design and manufacturing company, but he and his team were stuck. The business was underperforming financially, and they needed to turn it around. They had been developing a new strategy, but they were having trouble finalizing it and moving into action. And in meetings, the leadership team members would routinely agree to an element of the strategy, or they'd be silent, and then they would come to John individually after the meeting to tell him why he shouldn't follow through on what the team had apparently decided. And every time John held another team meeting to address the strategy, people kept coming to him afterward with the same sort of advice after these meetings. Some people weren't saying in the team meeting what they were really thinking. Instead, they were only speaking to John in private. And this pattern made it really impossible for the team to get a strategy in place and to generate the numbers that they needed. So why were some team members reluctant to state their disagreement with decisions in the full group? Because all of the fellow team members acted as though they were right and other people who disagreed with them were wrong. Essentially, there was this win-lose atmosphere in the room. If one member brought up an idea, others who disagreed would quickly shoot it down or they would dismiss it. And people asked very few questions in the meeting of each other. And when they did, it was really mostly to make a point rather than to understand each other's views. So people saw that the team was getting stuck, but no one said anything. Why did they not say anything? Because John's reports, his direct reports, all had what I call a one leader in the room mindset. They believed that because John was the formal leader, he was solely responsible for all the leadership functions in the team. He was responsible for guiding the direction of the meetings, challenging the team's thinking, and raising concerns about what was happening in the team. And if team members saw that the team was getting stuck and John didn't jump in to do something, team members just sat back and watched. Then they complained to other team members or to John. And it was as if the team was a boat and John was serving as the designer, the captain, and the navigator all at the same time, while the rest of the team members simply showed up to row. What John didn't realize was that he was contributing to the very problem he was complaining about. He had the same one leader in the room mindset. That is, when his direct reports complained to him about how the team wasn't working, he never said, "I expect you to speak up in the team if you think it's not working well." Instead, what he did was he redoubled his own efforts, and that just reinforced the team members' beliefs that they didn't need to hold each other accountable. John's team needed three types of results, the same kind of results that every leadership team needs. The first type of results is solid leadership, or rather solid performance. This is the main result you want from your team. Solid performance means your team makes high-quality decisions that increase innovation, decrease implementation time, and reduce costs. Leadership teams don't make services or products. Instead, what they make is decisions that affect all aspects of services or products in the organization. Now, John's team had trouble making decisions, but some teams have the opposite problem. They make decisions too fast. They think that the race ends when they make the decision. So leaders try to get the team's buy-in as quickly as possible, but that also turns out to slow down implementation time when team members don't really understand the decision or they disagree with it, and they sometimes even undermine it. So what looks like a fast decision ends up being a slow decision. On the other hand, smart teams know how to go slow to go fast. The second result that John's team needed was strong working relationships. When your team has strong working relationships, people are committed to the team, they're committed to the decisions the team makes, trust is high, and people manage conflict productively. When your team is overly dependent on you as their leader, though, members expect you to be all-seeing, all-knowing, and all-doing. But here's the challenge. You can't get a team unstuck all by yourself. You need all the members of your team to share accountability in that too. And finally, John needed a third result for himself and the other team members, and that's individual well-being. When you have individual well-being, team members feel motivated, satisfied, and not too stressed. In the short run, most team members are more than willing to put aside their needs for well-being to help the team and organization achieve its goals. But over time, if they don't get those needs met, they feel stuck or overwhelmed, and they feel taken advantage of. They feel like they're giving more than they're receiving. And they either disengage or become difficult to work with. So either behavior can reduce the team's effectiveness, its ability to achieve its goals, and it can also strain the team relationships. These three team results, performance, working relationships, and individual well-being, are all interdependent. Over time, poor working relationships will weaken your team's performance. And poor working relationships also decrease individual well-being. So to develop and to sustain an effective team, you need to attend to all three of these results. So think about these three results that every leadership team needs. And think about and ask yourself, how well is your team doing on each of these results? If your team isn't consistently getting all three of these results, then we're ready to move to the next piece of the puzzle. And that's what's getting your team stuck. If we get the next slide, you can see my one-word answer. Mindset. Mindset is the set of core values and assumptions that individuals and teams operate from. It's our way of seeing that shapes our thoughts, feelings, and behavior. I've already talked a little bit about mindset and how it affects the team. I mentioned the one leader in a room mindset that everyone on John's team had. If you're like John and you want to get fundamentally different results, it's not enough to change your behavior. You need to change your mindset. And that's because, if you look at the next slide, mindset drives behavior, and behavior leads to results. To explain why, let me give you a computer analogy. And if you go to the next slide, you'll see how this analogy works. To accomplish something on a computer, you need two kinds of software. You need application software and operating system. Applications like QuickTime, Google Maps, or Microsoft Office help you accomplish a specific task. The operating system, like Windows or Linux, organizes and controls all of the computer software. Without an operating system, your computer doesn't work, which is why they call it an operating system. When you need to accomplish something with your computer that you can't do with your current applications, you either buy some new application software or you upgrade your current version. If you install QuickTime, Google Maps, or Office, and you have a current operating system like Windows 7, or now we have Windows 8, then things will run smoothly, they'll run fine, and you'll be happy. And you can see that picture on the right end of the results. It's what we call a happy camper in the United States. You're satisfied with the way things go. In the same way, though, if you go to the next slide, you'll see what happens when you try to run that brand new software application, but you've got an old operating system like Windows 95, which came out in 1995. Your old operating system doesn't have the ability to run the new software, so your application works slow, not at all, or crashes your computer, and you can see the kind of results in the right-hand column. In the same way, as a leader, you may try out a new behavior that you read about or saw, and you expect that you can just create that new behavior just like you install a new software program and get better results. But if your new behavior isn't congruent with your operating system or your mindset, then your mindset will trump your new behavior, and the behavior won't work. Finally, if you want your team to get better results, then everyone on the team needs to have the same mindset, the same operating system. Think of it as computer networking. You all need to use compatible operating systems, or otherwise work gets slowed down, you get mired in conflict. makes your work less productive and less satisfying. So unless the team changes its collective mindset, your team will stay stuck. I think that explains why so many leadership teams and tools don't work. They try to change behavior without changing the underlying operating system, the underlying mindset. And as a result, organizations are littered with the remains of once touted change efforts that focused only on changing behaviors. Look around your organization, check your bookshelf. You may see some of those remains. And the sad part here is that those behavior changes you tried to make could have been useful if they were supported by a change in you and your team's mindset. Now, so far, I've said that you and your team's mindset can get you stuck, but I haven't said what that mindset is. The mindset is called unilateral control. And the research in my 30-plus years of working with leaders and teams shows that in even moderately challenging situations, almost all leaders and their teams tend to use the unilateral control mindset. And that's despite the negative results it gets. In short, how you and your team think is how you lead. Let me give you one example of what it looks like when you're using the unilateral control mindset with your team. Let's say you're meeting with your direct reports to decide whether and how to offer a new significant service to your customers. You've been thinking it's a smart move to add a new service, but from what you can gather from previous discussions, you think at least 2 of your direct reports, Jake and Sarah, may not have been on board. And you need everyone's total commitment to make this work. So your goal for the meeting is to convince all the team members that the new service is the way to go. Before the meeting, you plan your strategy. You make a mental list of pros and cons for offering the new service, and then for each con, each objection, you prepare a response, a way to neutralize the objection. Then for each objection, when it comes up, you're ready. Now, even though you've got a strong view on this issue, you don't want to come right out and share it. You want the people on your team to build the case for the new service. And at the meeting, you begin by asking your reports whether they think the new service should be added. The meeting seems to be going pretty well. That is until Jake and Sarah start to talk. And they see more cons than pros. As they talk, you think to yourself, just as I thought, these 2 do not get it. They don't understand. So you try to help them see the light by saying things like, you don't really think we can grow this business without the new service, do you? And they start to tell you that the division could make more profit if it introduced a different service than the one that you're talking about. And that leads a couple of team members to disagree with Jake and Sarah, and although you're happy that the other team members are taking your side in this discussion, you're concerned that Jake and Sarah are taking the conversation off track. And you say to them, that's not what we're here to talk about. And then the meeting doesn't seem to go anywhere, and you decide in frustration to end the conversation by telling the team, thanks for your input on this. And you walk out of the meeting thinking to yourself, how are you going to get Jake and Sarah on board as your division starts to offer the new service? So when you use a unilateral control mindset like that, and you're working with people who have different views than you do, the essence of your mindset is simple, and you can see it there. I understand, you don't. I'm right, you're wrong. I will win. When you use a unilateral control mindset, you're trying to achieve your goals by controlling the situation. Because you believe that you understand the situation and are right, you try to influence others to do what you want them to do while avoid being influenced yourself. You assume that any logically thinking person would agree with you, and so if they don't, they're either not logical or they've got questionable motives. If you get angry at your team and do things that you'd rather not do, like cut people off or ask them a lot of questions until they understand your point, well, your feelings and behaviors are justified. If others hadn't acted ineffectively, you wouldn't need to do what you're doing. And underlying all of this mindset is the assumption that you're not contributing to the problem. Others are the problem, and you're simply doing your best to make things better. Finally, you and your team don't discuss how the team is working or not working as well as it needs to. Because raising those issues would only make the situation worse in your mind. Now keep in mind that you're probably not the only one in your team operating from a unilateral control mindset. If your team is dealing with high stakes issues where there's strong and different views, the chances are good that all of your team members are using the same unilateral control mindset. And all of this leads to the poor results I described earlier. You get lower quality decisions and longer implementation because all the relevant information isn't on the table. You get little commitment because the solutions don't take into account different team members' needs. And you get reduced well-being because team members get frustrated with how the team's working. I want to emphasize that although almost all of us use the unilateral control mindset, when things get tough, we don't wake up in the morning and think, whose life can I make miserable today? And we don't think we're being ineffective. We just think we're doing the best thing for the team. We do it naturally without thinking. But people around us who see things differently can clearly see our unilateral control approach. So if your team is stuck like this, you can't get unstuck simply by changing your behavior. If you try that, your unilateral control mindset will just take over. And you'll find yourself and your team back in the same spot. So getting different results requires changing your mindset. Now, I've said it requires changing your mindset. The good news here is that you already have another more effective mindset that you can develop, and it's called mutual learning. And if you can put up the next slide, you'll see the essence of mutual learning. The essence of mutual learning is this. I understand some things, so do you. Let's move forward together. When you use a mutual learning mindset, you achieve your goals with others, not over others. You see challenging issues like a puzzle to solve with others instead of like a game of chess to win. You see each member of your team as having different pieces of the puzzle. And your job, along with other team members, is to jointly put the puzzle together. You're open to being influenced by team members. At the same time, you seek to influence them. Now here's what the same meeting with your direct reports would look like if you used a mutual learning mindset. You're still thinking it's a smart move to add the new service, and from what you can gather from previous conversations, you still think Jake and Sarah may not be on board, and you may need everyone's total commitment to make this work. But instead of setting a goal of trying to convince all your team members that the new service is the smart decision, your goal becomes getting all the information on the table to make the best possible decision. Instead of assuming that you understand the situation completely and that those who disagree are clueless, you approach the meeting in a way that you recognize that you might be missing things and the other people will see what you're missing, and vice versa. So when the meeting begins, instead of withholding your opinion, you tell the team what you're thinking. That you consider that this is a good move to add the new service, but you want to get all the information on the table and make a decision that ideally everyone can commit to. And you're not apprehensive about having people have different views. You see that as a way of people learning from each other. And you want to test out assumptions in the group. And when Sarah and Jake say that they don't think the new service will meet the profit criterion, instead of thinking they don't get it, you get curious and you ask, well, what's it about the service that you're thinking won't be profitable? Why is that? And then that leads Jake and Sarah to explain their thinking. And what they're thinking is that even though you're suggesting the new service has greater margins, and they think it's a valuable service too, they explain in detail to you how that service is very difficult to scale. And that means less profitability in the long run. And then you ask others in the team what they think about Jake and Sarah's views, and you learn that they agree with Jake and Sarah. at that point you realize that you have incorrectly assumed that the service could be scalable very easily. So that's the difference in results, okay, between unilateral control and mutual learning. And if you look at the difference between unilateral control and mutual learning, it's the difference in those three results. In mutual learning, you get stronger performance, you get stronger working relationships, and you get stronger individual well-being. Now, it's important that when you get all those three results, you as the leader are not relinquishing your responsibility. You are still responsible for the team. So if we think about what makes that second team meeting more productive than the first meeting, it's not just that people are talking differently. It's that they're thinking differently, that they are actually operating from a different mindset. And when they're operating from a different mindset, they're operating from a different set of core values. One of the core values that they're operating from is transparency. And if you just toggle a little bit more down, I think you'll see the transparency core value there. There it is. And you know, if you look at that head, it's a way of saying these are things that are part of our mindset. Okay? Transparency is not simply behavior; it's a core value that we have. Right? And that makes a huge difference not in what we think, which leads to how we act and get different results. Okay? Now, one of the things that we talk about when we talk about transparency is that it's the ability to share what you're thinking and what you're feeling and what your strategy is for using the conversation. That's what transparency is about. All of us have strategies that we use in conversations, okay? Even if we're not aware of what the strategy is. Sometimes we try to hide those strategies because we don't want people to know what they are. And we tend to hide those strategies when they're unilaterally controlling strategies. A really good example of this is what I call the sandwich approach to feedback. This is where you've got negative feedback to give people, and what you do is you sandwich the negative feedback between two pieces of positive feedback. Okay? So I want to give you a tool that you can use to figure out whether the strategy that you're using is unilaterally controlling. So here's how it works. It has 3 steps. The first step is to identify the strategy that you're using in the conversation. So if we take the feedback sandwich approach, okay, and we think about the strategy, what we're often told, if you're familiar with this strategy, is you start off giving some positive feedback because that will relax the person and make them feel more comfortable and they won't get as defensive. Then you give them the negative feedback, which is why you called them in there in the first place. And then you give some more positive feedback at the end because that will make them less angry and they'll leave the meeting feeling better about themselves and they won't be so angry at you. Okay? So that's the strategy. It's the first step of the transparency test. The second step of the transparency test is to imagine telling people what your strategy is and checking with them. Okay? Now, remember that this is a thought experiment. You're going to do this in your head, but I'm doing this step out loud so you can see what it looks like. And so if I were imagining it or being transparent about my strategy, I might say to you, if you're my team, so the reason that I called this meeting is because I've got some negative feedback to give you. And I want to be really transparent with you about my strategy and see if it'll work for you. First, I want to start off giving you some positive feedback, because I think if I start off with some positive feedback, you'll be relaxed, you'll be more comfortable, and you won't be so defensive. Then I'm going to give you the negative feedback, which is really why I called this meeting. And after I give you the negative feedback, I'm going to give you some more positive feedback because I think that will make you feel better about yourself, maintain your self-esteem, and less angry with me. So I just want to check to see how will that work for you. That brings us to the third step. If you're thinking, I couldn't possibly say that out loud, or if you're laughing because that sounds absurd, the third step is to notice your reaction. And if you're, as I said, if you're thinking, I couldn't say that, or it's absurd, that's the point. Because unilateral control strategies don't work if you share them. They only work if you keep them private, or if other people know what you're doing and agree to play along anyway. So you can use this transparency test anytime you want to figure out whether your strategy is being unilaterally controlled. So that's something that you can do on the transparency side. Now, if you think about what you might say that would be fully transparent, and you would share the strategy, it might sound like this. You might say, I've called this meeting because I've got some concerns about some of the things that you said and did in the meeting yesterday with our directors, and I want to give you some feedback about it. Here's how I'd like to do it, and I want to see if that'll work for you. I want to start off sharing with you the specifics of what I'm concerned about and why I'm concerned about it, and I want to see whether you agree that it happened the way that I was seeing it. If it did, great. Well, then we can move forward and talk more about what the concerns were, what led you to do it the way you did, and figure out what, if anything, we need to do differently. And I'm open to the possibility that I may have contributed to this in a way that I'm not aware of, or that I may have missed some things. So, will that work for you? Now, that strategy isn't particularly funny to share, but it's something that when I share it with other people, they're more likely to say, yes, that's a decent strategy. We can have a meeting like that. And it means that everyone can follow that strategy because I've been able to be transparent about it. So that's a key core value of mutual learning to create smarter teams. There's a second core value I want to talk about, and that's curiosity. And here the value of curiosity is that you get a much better result in your team, not only if you share what you're thinking, but if you ask people what they're thinking, because transparency and curiosity go hand in hand. When you share your views, other people understand what you're thinking. And when you ask people about their views, you understand what they're thinking. And that's how you build conversations and solve problems in teams by combining transparency and curiosity. Now, one of the challenges that team members often have is, how do you distinguish between just acting curious and being genuinely curious? And I want to give you another thought experiment you can do to figure that out. And I call this the You Idiot test. You have to pardon the language. Right? So the You Idiot test works like this. It has 3 steps again. The first step is to imagine, think about the question you're about to ask someone. So let's think about your team again. And your team, with just a couple of weeks left in the fiscal year, tells you that they are over budget and behind schedule on a really significant project. And you are tempted to say to them or ask them a rhetorical question, which is something like, why do you think I told you to get it done this year? Because you're really frustrated about how they've come to you and they've come to you so late. So you take that question, why do you think I told you to get it done this fiscal year? And then in step 2 of this thought experiment, you simply add the words, you idiot, to the end of the question. And you imagine yourself saying that. So it might sound like, why do you think I told you guys to get it done before the end of this fiscal year, you idiot? You could use whatever term you want at the end. It doesn't have to be you idiot. Okay? Now, the third step is to think about how it sounds with the words "you idiot" on the end. If it sounds, the question sounds just as natural with the words "you idiot" added to the end of it, don't ask the question. Because it's not a genuine question. It's a rhetorical question where you're trying to get your point across. Instead, take that rhetorical question and break it up into two parts. Start off by being transparent, in which case you might say, I'm really frustrated because we planned this so we would get done in this fiscal year, and now that it's not, our next year's budget is in jeopardy. Put a period at the end of that, and then get curious and ask a genuine question like, I'm wondering, tell me what happened that led you to go over budget and over time, and also, I'm curious, what led you not to say anything before? And when you ask a genuine question like that, you increase the chance that you will learn things you don't already know. And you open a window or a door or a space for other people to share their views. So those are two really important core values of the mutual learning approach to create smarter teams. Now, I want to briefly talk to you about some resources that are available to you, 3 resources. And if you look at this next slide, you'll see them. Can we just go quickly to the next slide? There we go. So if you found what I've been talking about appealing and compelling, there's a free article called 8 Behaviors for Smarter Teams that you can download at our website. If you want to take a brief survey, find out how well your team is working in terms of mutual learning, there's a survey you can take on the site. If you want to follow me on Twitter, I tweet something about once a day, and it's always related to building effective teams. And if you've got more thoughts or questions, you're welcome to follow up at info@Schwarz Associates. I want to summarize where we've been in the short time we've had together. So I started off by posing this puzzle, which is, why is it that when you get a group of smart people together, they end up being less than the sum of their parts? And my answer was mindset. When people use a unilateral control mindset instead of a mutual learning mindset, they end up getting stuck. But when they shift to a mutual learning mindset, they're able to create results they hadn't been able to create before. And that is stronger performance, stronger working relationships, and more positive individual well-being. Now, if you think about developing an effective team, that really starts with making some fundamental choices about what it means to be a leader and what it means to be a team. And before today, you may not have thought much about this. Or if you did, you may have thought that you only had an option of unilateral control. And I'm hoping that after our discussion today, you'll see that there is another option of using mutual learning. And it makes the difference between your team being stuck and creating a team that gets results. So thank you. We've got some time to take some questions and answers. Is that right, Sally?
Yes, we have, and thank you so much, Roger. I am sure those who have been listening very patiently have got some questions, burning questions to ask. Well, leaders in the workplace, looks like we've got new KPIs. He's given us a new KPI like PWI, performance, work relationships, and individual well-being to start with. There's so much talk about employees wanting autonomy, but we hear today that there are some values about accountability. But I thought today's focus on, it's not just about the responsibility of the leader that makes a high-performing team, but also the responsibilities of being a team member. I thought this is really interesting. I'm going to invite the different ones of you. I see Peter from Agoda. You've joined us, Peter. Hello. I see Zai, and I see all of you. Who would like to kick off with the first question that you are wanting to ask, more than curiosity?
All right, okay. Why don't I start with a question, Sally? Roger, hi, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Okay, fine, thank you. All right, I've been listening attentively your presentation, and part of it I have heard it before. For example, like mindset and mutual learning. Perhaps in another form, people call it learning organization by Peter Senge. I suppose you may have heard of it. They also talk. Peter Senge also talk about team learning. Okay, I have a few questions, but I think I should limit myself to 2 questions. One is, how different is the mutual learning with team learning of Peter Senge? Right, and another question is, we have heard a lot of what makes people, what makes team stuck, what helps team to work. But we perhaps because of time, we have not heard enough of how to eliminate control, the unilateral control mindset, how to institute mutual learning. Over to you, Sally, or Pete, or Roger.
Got it. So let me try to take your questions in the order you asked them. The first question is about how mutual learning is similar to or different from the team learning model that Peter Senge talks about in his book, The Fifth Discipline. The answer is they're similar. It turns out that Peter Senge's work on team learning came from the work of Chris Ardress, who for many years worked with his partner Don Chern to create what they called Model 2 organizations. I happened to be a student of Chris Ardress's when I was a graduate student at Harvard, and so my work is really a development of Chris Ardress's work, which Peter Senge also drew on. So you'll see a lot of similarities. The differences are that if you look at the work that Peter Senge engages in, one of the things that I've tried to do is try to get more specific about what are the specific behaviors that people can use to create that smarter team, and how do they go about doing that? Which leads to the second question, and I haven't talked so much about that today because it's a very long conversation, and it's almost not a conversation, but it's an experience. It's about how you help people change their mindset by seeing their own behavior and seeing their own results.
Thank you, Zai, for the question. You can continue asking your questions through the STADA website, but actually, a couple of the how is really in the book, which I had the opportunity to quickly look through before this webinar. The how to build smarter teams. Quite a lot of stuff in here, great stuff. And there is, of course, a 20% discount if you are one of the people listening in to this webinar today.
Wow, that's great.
Thank you, Roger, for this wonderful help. 20% discount. Peter, I think you're on. You're waiting to ask a question.
I see that Peter says he's typing the question. So and I see you smiling, so I'm thinking that you heard what I said. Okay.
Do we have somebody else who's ready with a question while Peter is typing?
Actually, it says, how can we use this strategy in performance reviews, which are usually one-way discussions? Okay. So if you think about performance reviews, and I absolutely agree with you, Peter, they are usually one-way discussions. There is a myth that we create in all performance reviews that I'm aware of, and that myth is that somehow the performance review is about the performance of the direct report, as if the direct report is not in a relationship with his or her boss. And if you really say and believe that organizations and teams are systems, you can't ask your direct report how his or her year went, or tell your direct report how his or her year went, without also asking the question, how did I do in contributing to how your year went? It's just not fair, let alone not possible. Okay? And so I think a performance review with integrity is really one that looks in both directions. And it's also a place where if you are the leader and you haven't given feedback to your direct report about something in, let's say, a month, then the accountability suggests that you can't use that as part of the review because you have denied that person 4 weeks worth of the ability to change. Okay? So that's the other accountability piece. There are a number of ways in which it becomes two-way, and accountability goes two ways.
Jessica, student chapter, shoot. What's your question?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, very clear. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Jessica from Temasek Polytechnic. Then my question is, how do you actually communicate the right or exemplary mindsets to others? How do you actually know which mindset will help the individual to produce results and complement certain working relationships?
So the question about how do you know which mindset works, the research suggests that unilateral control mindset almost never works. Certainly not in any case where you have to sustain behavior and results over time. So then the question becomes, how do you really engage in mutual learning? And I think your question is about how do you create that? Is that part of what the question is? Am I getting that right? So one important way is to model it, and then to ask others around you whether, in fact, you are doing what you think you are doing. Because we often think that we are acting in a mutual learning approach, yet we're acting really in unilateral control. That is, we are blind often to our own unilateral control, but others can see it clearly. So it becomes really important to have others around us who can give us feedback right at the moment so that we are improving the extent to which we're moving toward mutual learning.
Roger, can you see Ratna's question?
I can. It says, my question is, in teams of high performers, at times the biggest challenge is to deal with huge egos. In that sort of environment, how do you build mutual learning? So, Ratna, the huge egos is the part where part of unilateral control, where people think they are right and others are wrong, and that they understand and others don't, and they have a need to be right and be seen as right all the time. And the way that you address that is working in the team and helping the team see how that part of the mindset creates the very results they are trying to avoid. There are people on that team who are dissatisfied with the results that they're getting. But what they haven't figured out is that they are contributing to their results that they are dissatisfied with, and their contribution is about those egos. And so you raise that issue with people as you see it come up. It's not easy. It's not something you do just once and it's finished. But part of using this approach is discussing what we call undiscussable issues. It's one of the 8 behaviors I talk about in that article for Smarter Teams.
Thank you. Rizky, are you on to ask your question?
Yeah, I'm typing my question, but my internet connection is not very good.
Okay. Zai, you've got your second question?
Can I have another chance of question, eh?
Sure, you have another chance while they're typing.
Okay, good. Since Rachna's question is about ego just now, why don't I follow up with another question following that? Talking about unilateral control, in a team, working in a team, some of the mindset is more appearing, more easy to identify than others. A more blatant mindset will speak up. But how about the more subtle mindset where it's very difficult to identify? Like, how should we go about with this?
Can you give me an example of what might be a difficult mindset to identify? I can do a good job of answering your question that way.
Okay. For example, in a team, rather than having the mindset of the individual members clearly, they tend to be quiet, more introvert, but they will speak to others, the team members, and this will poison them, the other members' mindset.
So that's an example that you described is actually what was happening with John Haley's team. That is, some people were very quiet in the team, but they talked to team members outside of the meeting, and they talked to John outside of the meeting and after the meeting. And so it doesn't have to be that people are speaking up. It could be that people aren't speaking up, or that they're saying one thing in the meeting and saying something else outside of the meeting. And so the idea is to identify what the behavior is, whatever it is, and that leads you to get curious and begin to make inferences about what is in their mindset. You can't know that, right? You have to ask about it. But if you find that the behavior is something that you think is less effective than it could be, you describe the behavior, you check to see whether the person agrees that that's what they're engaging in, and then you talk about how you think that behavior, if it were different, could help the team be more effective. That's one of the things that I talk about in the article about 8 behaviors, which we call testing inferences.
Thank you, Roger. While Roger is reading another question from Rizky, I see student ready to ask a question as well. Quickly, your question.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, hi, Dr. Roger. You have mentioned that under the curiosity value, there's the you idiot test. So what kinds of questions, like example, can we give to our members so that we can pass the idiot test?
Young people idiot test.
So, well, here's the wonderful thing. If you're genuinely curious, the questions will come automatically to you. And the questions are always take the form that enable the person you're asking to respond broadly. In other words, a curious question doesn't put your own point of view into the question. It's generally open-ended, not always. But whatever you're wondering about, you ask. So you might say, so I'm curious, tell me what about what I'm suggesting doesn't make sense to you. Or you think that we can't do this in the time that I've suggested. Help me understand what you're thinking that I might not be thinking about. It's really the sense of having a wonderful, I want to say a naivete, but it's not really being naive. It's just genuinely being curious without worrying about whether it's right or wrong. If you think about what you were like when you were a little child, you didn't think about whether it was right or wrong. You just wanted to know how things worked and why they worked. That's the kind of mindset that enables teams to be much more creative than they normally are.
Thank you so much, Roger. I think we have time just for 2 very short questions. I think you've received Rizky's question. Could you take us through that?
Yes, so the question is, what strategy would I recommend to create influence? Because everybody has a different mindset. So how do you influence people is the question that I'm understanding. Is that right, Rizky?
Yeah.
Okay. So here's one of the wonderful things about mutual learning. And let me contrast it with unilateral control. In unilateral control, people spend a lot of time trying to figure out how to influence other people. In mutual learning, you just use curiosity and you ask. You say to your boss, listen, I don't want to waste your time. I don't want to waste my time. Tell me what would influence you on this topic, if anything. If you're not open to being influenced, let me know, and I'll honor that. That's fine. If you are being open to influence, what would make a difference to you? And then I can speak to that if I have information about it, or if I don't, I won't. Okay? That's the wonderful thing about being curious. You don't have to guess what influences people. You ask them. What do you think?
Okay, that's clear enough, but I think that's about the communication techniques, how the team members and the supervisor to be communicate effectively each other.
So if you're talking about how to communicate effectively with each other, then people do differ in the way that they communicate. They differ in how they like to receive information. And again, the wonderful thing about mutual learning is you don't have to guess. You can sit down with your team and you can say, listen, we all have different ways of working. We have different preferences. Let's figure out what each of our preferences are, how we like to receive information, when we like to receive it, you know, the form in which we like it, and then let's figure out how we're going to work together as a team, given that people have some different preferences.
We have time just to finish one last question. I think Ratna asked for asking that question. I do invite the rest of you to continue to send your questions to us, to the STADA website, on your Facebook, and we will take it from there. Roger, Ratna's last question.
Sure. So the last question is about Rahman's having observed that at times people aren't comfortable sharing their views no matter how many times you ask. What do you do as a team leader to get everyone involved? So you ask a question about the issue. If you see that people seem not to be comfortable sharing their views, then you point that out and you say, it looks like you're not comfortable. Right? And I'm wondering if that's the case. If it is the case, can you say a little bit about what leads you not to be comfortable and what would need to happen to be comfortable? Now, ideally, you would have that conversation in the team. But it may be that you can't have that conversation in the team initially, and then you have to have that as a one-on-one conversation with the person. But ultimately, what you want to find out from that person is what is leading them to feel uncomfortable, and what would need to change in order for them to be comfortable enough to speak. The key thing about leadership is that comfort is overrated, I like to say. It is, leadership isn't about being comfortable. It's about being effective, even if you're feeling uncomfortable. And so part of the role of a leader is to be effective, even in places where they're not as comfortable as they want to be. Having said that, as a leader, you still want to make the situation as comfortable as possible for as many people as possible.
Thank you so much, Roger, and all our participants. We need to bring things to a close. I am sure we have all benefited from what Roger has shared this morning. We're all going to look at a sandwich very differently when we give feedback, especially. Actually, it can be as easy as ABC, I think. Roger has shared a lot, but I thought it's all about really our attitude, which is our mindset, where we change unilateral control for mutual learning and other values of transparency and curiosity, because we are after behavior change. It is not about installing more code of conduct, but really about instilling values of respecting another person, because that other person has a piece of the puzzle that we do not have. And of course, we all aspire to see change in the workplace, a workplace that is known for high-performing teams, smarter teams, not smarting teams from our unwise, perhaps, leadership. The choice is yours. It starts with change, and I think the change starts with you and me wanting to change our own mindset. And I think team members on our team will also be influenced and come alongside to change mindset too. Now, to all of you, thank you so much for being part of this. You can continue. If you're a LinkedIn user, go to Community Spirit, go into the STADA Facebook, and watch this webinar again. This is Sally Chiu, your moderator, signing off from the Glocal Connect Village. Have a good day, and we'll see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sally.